Okay, today what we are going to see is about the task flow. It's very important topic to cover because task flow is one of the feature which you will be extensively using in any application you develop, because it's one of the biggest advantage of using ADF. In OAF world, we used to use a lot of used to write a lot of code just for navigation purpose only. But here the navigation rule can be configured visually, and the task flows are very powerful so that you can avoid a lot of code as well. So let's try to create a one task flow page, and we will use the same logic like what we used to create the master page. On the left hand side we had the search, on the right hand side we had the detail page in case of the master page. But in case of task flow, we'll have a separate search page, and then we will have a separate detail page, and we will combine them together using the unbounded task flow. There are two kinds of task flows in ADF. One is unbounded task flow, the other one is bounded task flow. The unbounded task flow is like an entry point to the application. It can be used to configure menus, all those stuff. And the bounded task flow, it's a self-contained task flow. It has a definite starting point, and it can have one or more or no exit points. And most of the application in ADF are done using the bounded task flows. And the every application you create in ADF, you'll have one unbounded task flow. Of course, you can create more than one unbounded task flow as well, but the general practice is to use one unbounded task flow as an entry point to the application. Let us see a quick comparison. Let me check where it is, the task flows. Yeah, task flows. Okay, so as I told you, we have two kinds of task flows, unbounded task flow and bounded task flow, and then we'll compare them as well. So ADF task flows are the logical units of page flows that can break application into series of tasks with a shared memory scope. It's very important to start right in ADF, because refactoring it is a difficult task compared to building it for the first time. So you have to come up with an architectural pattern, all those things, which we'll discuss in the subsequent sessions, where we'll break the application into different modules, and different modules will have its own application, and it will have the combination of all bounded task flows. Then you can drag and drop those bounded task flows into wherever you want, or if it's a page fragment. If it is a page-based task flow, you can just call the URL or call the another bounded task flows through the navigation rule. This is a perfect structure of an unbounded task flow. You see, the entry point is a wildcard entry, and most of the times you will see this global navigation options available in the page, right? The home, preferences, profile, all those stuff. So it can enter from any page. That's what we are saying. This is a wildcard entry. So once you configure like this navigation rule, whatever you specify here, will be applicable for the entire pages in the application. So you can go to sales order page, and from there, if you want to go to home page, you can do so. Instead of configuring in each and every page, since it's a global navigation rule in the unbounded task flow, you can refer this value in the actions property of any button or link you create in any page you want. So it provides a wildcard entry. Also, from the unbounded task flow, you can call another bounded task flow. This is the create update employee BTF we are calling, which is nothing but a bounded task flow. You can drag and drop this bounded task flow into this unbounded task flow, and you can call that using manage employees rule. Once you enable this manage employees rule, then in your page, say for example this employees page, the actions button will have the manage employees link. Once you select that, then this navigation rule will be applied. The bounded task flow, a typical example of a bounded task flow with one entry point, which is the default activity, and then it can have more than one exit point, or it doesn't have an exit point. So in this case of bounded task flow, this is a create edit bounded task flow. Here we can update or edit, update or create a new employee. That is based on the parameter what we pass to this router. This router takes the value, the parameter value, and then it checks some condition and then decides it's a create route or an update route. If it is a create route, it calls the create insert and then goes to the same page. And in case of update, it sets the current row with the keyway and then it goes to the employee page. So what is the difference is it's the same page, but when it is a router decides whether it is a create, it will go in the create mode so that you can create a new record, or you have to pass the value of the key. That's nothing but, for example, employee ID is 1, employee ID 2, all those things. If you pass employee ID 2, the employee ID 2 will be queried and it will be ready for update in the employee. Here you can decide whether you want to save or cancel. If you do a save, it will commit the record and come back out of the task flow, on a task flow. If you cancel, it will roll back or issue the rollback, and then it comes back to the previous screen. So this is a self-contained unit. If you've seen, there is a single point of entry. This router is nothing but the single point of entry, and from there uh, it does few operations, and then it comes back using the save or cancel. Either you can save or cancel, because this task flow is starting a new transaction. When you start a new transaction, you have to make sure that you're committing the transaction or rollbacking transaction at the end of the transaction. You cannot just exit. The bounded task flow has a definite entry point, and then here in this case it has a definite exit point, and it also has more than one exit points. We'll see each one by one, like what is a view activity. The view activity can be a page or page fragment. The difference is, if you have a page, you can just call this page. In case of page fragment, you can drag and drop to any page you want. For example, the features like attachments, which is reusable feature, and contacts, and then call logs, all these things are used across the application. In those cases, you will be just dragging and dropping the page fragment, the task flow based page fragment into the page, and you can reuse the functionality. Say if you have hundreds of 200 pages in your application, you don't have to develop this feature every time. Instead, you do it once as a bounded task flow page fragment, and you can drag and drop to any page you want and parameterize these page fragments so that it takes the right values of the base page. That is, for example, the object ID, object type. The object ID can be like your for example, campaign lead or list in CRM, or it can be a sales order or a PO or in the ERP system. So you can just pass the value of the base page, and then based on that, it will query the information as well as create new transaction for the attachments. That's how EBS does it. The same concept you can apply here in the ADF task flow as well. The router activity, it evaluates an expression. The expression can be based on a parameter which is passed to the task flow. Based on that, it can decide it's a create or edit route. And the method call, it can be any Java method, or it can be an operation binding like the create insert or set current row with key value. You can just drag and drop this method call into the task flow, and there you can decide which whether it's a custom function or a default operation available. So right now at this moment of time, just remember these things, and then we will do a practical example. Then you can practice that as well. You have to practice at this at least 5 times this example, so that you're comfortable with this, because you will be doing again and again in your application, because this is the maximum number of pages you will be creating with the same concept. And you can, of course, you can call another bounded task flow inside a task flow. So it can be recursive or it can be continuous with the different calls made in the task flow. And the task flow return activity is to decide when to exit the task flow. And when you start a new transaction, you can exit with a task flow return activity, but you need to compulsorily issue a commit or rollback. If you don't start a transaction, you can just simply exit the task flow using the task flow return activity. This is for a save point. For example, if you are filling up a huge form and it has 5 steps, that's the train stops, and you have filled up 2 steps, and suddenly the third step you lose the internet or something like that. In that case, you don't have to start from scratch. When you actually restart, all the things which you have filled up in the first two train stops will be available. You can continue with the third stop. You don't have to again start from scratch. This feature is available in save point restore functionality. You can save for later. And the URL view activity is something like you can call an external application like www.oracle.com. If you want to call from your application, you can use the URL view activity, which will act like an iframe to show the information of oracle.com in your application. Let us compare what is a bounded task flow and an unbounded task flow. The unbounded task flow is, it doesn't have a well-defined boundary. As I told you, you can if you have a wildcard entry point, you can call that navigation rule across any page in your application. So it doesn't have a boundary, well-defined boundary, and also it doesn't have a single point of entry. If you see the home profile preferences, it can be entered from any page, and the navigation rule is like wildcard entry to the home page. But in case of bounded task flow, if you really notice, it has a definite start point. That is, this green background indicates that this is a default activity. Whenever this bounded task flow is called from any an unbounded task flow or a bounded task flow, or if it is embedded into another page fragment, the default activity is the first one which is being called. So it has a definite entry point. Okay, it can have
Uh,
zero or more exit points. Yeah. Any queries?
Sudhakar, just like for bonded task flow, we have many examples like purchase orders, sales orders,
Right.
and for unbounded task flow, is there any real-time example
That's what I've
from a
shown here. Like for example, you can call the home preferences profile, which is available in the global navigation area. No, if you open any application,
okay,
you will see
yes, yes.
that the home preferences, all those things. You
Okay,
can
multiple,
go,
yeah, fields. Means
yeah,
in the navigation home page, we have these certain
yes,
fields, links,
yeah.
functions. Okay,
Yeah, these
okay.
functions are available across the application. From any page, you can
Yes.
just click home, it will come. That's because this wildcard rule is there, right? So it will give you the option to call that navigation rule from any page you want. So classic case is this unbounded task flow. The unbounded task flow, if you right click and you can create as a menu entry, then you can use that menu entry to create the menus on the page. Like it can be home, preferences, profile, employees, or it can be a drop down as well. That's the major purpose of using a unbounded task flow. But there will be hundreds of bounded task flows in the application. There will be at least one unbounded task flow. Whenever you create an application, it automatically creates this unbounded task flow, one unbounded task flow in the application. I'll show you in the JDeveloper where it creates and how to use that. And you cannot parameterize the unbounded task flow. But in case of bounded task flow, you can have both input and output parameters. It can be bookmarked. If you are on a page accessed through unbounded task flow, you can bookmark for a future entry. But bounded task flow, it has a definite start point and definite one or more exit points, so it cannot be bookmarked. And you cannot manage transaction. You can just navigate. For example, home preferences, all those things. You cannot manage any transaction on that. You can simply just go to that page. That's the objective of using a unbounded task flow. Mostly it acts like a it acts like a it acts like an entry point into the application rather than managing some transaction. And the bounded task flow, it can manage transaction. It can be used to manage existing transaction, or it can be used for starting a new transaction. And the unbounded task flow, you cannot call an unbounded task flow from another task flow. But bounded task flow, it can be invoked from an unbounded task flow, or it can be invoked from a page as a page fragment, or it can be invoked from another bounded task flow. So it becomes completely reusable functionality, and also it's widely used as well. So the understanding the concept that a bounded task flow can be reused across the application by just making a task flow call, or it can be a page fragment which can be dragged into another page, or it can be a bounded task flow which can be called from another unbounded task flow. And it the bounded task flow, as I told you, it cannot be used as a region in the page, but in case of bounded task flow, we can use it as a region in a page with the page fragments. Let us quickly create this application, which will have manage employees page as well as the search employees page. The search employees page we will drag and drop to the unbounded task flow, and from there we will call an bounded task flow, which is the create edit task flow, so that we know the difference between what is the unbounded task flow and bounded task flow, how it can work together also we can understand. So whenever I create a new application, you could see that this ADFC config file has been automatically created. This is nothing but an unbounded task flow. If I want to add a home preferences, all those things, I can do that as well. For example, I can make a wildcard rule, and in that I can call few views like home, okay, I can just create this so it has created these two pages which I am referencing to the home and preferences option. Now if I go to preferences and try to add one button, and I call this as home, the actions, you can see this home and preferences navigation link is available. So throughout the application, whichever the page I'm in, I can access these unbounded task flow options, the navigation rule, and then when you click on this button, it will go to the home page. Ideally, this should be used in the page template so that you don't have to do it across each and every page you develop in the application. But the idea is these navigation rules, whatever you create in unbounded task flow, it will be available throughout the application. So it's your job to match that in the template. If you use it in the template, and whichever the template is used by whichever the page, it will automatically come, or else you have to manually do this, like whatever I've been doing, which is not a good practice, because every time going to each and every page and changing these values is not a good practice. But the concept of unbounded task flow, it acts as a entry point into the application. It also provides a wildcard entry, so you can call from any page you want. Our focus will be more towards the bounded task flow, because that is what you are going to create a lot of time in the real world example or real world applications. You will be using that extensively. So we'll concentrate more on the bounded task flow, and later, once we create the bounded task flow, we'll drag and drop the bounded task flow into this unbounded task flow. Just for navigation purpose, we will use this. Okay, let us quickly build two task flows. One is for search page, the other one is for the create edit page. First, we'll create a create edit page task flow. We will see about this based on template, all those things later. Once we understand the concept of template, we can add that as well. We call this as BTF. It indicates that it's a bounded task flow. That's why it is called BTF. And we can put this under flows. So in look wise, it is almost similar to the unbounded task flow, but here it clearly indicates that it is a bounded task flow. In case of bounded task flow, what we had is a router to start with. To use the router, this is the router. Here we will decide it's a create or edit. ADF gives you a visually defined option for you to create your task flows, and it will really help in the longer run, because you know how the flow of the page happens, one, and second, you don't have to write a Java code for this navigation rules or navigation passing parameters, all those things. You can declaratively do those things in the task flow using the task flow option. Now we have create or edit, and then we have the task flow return activities. The task flow return, either it can be a save or cancel. And if you want to embed a page, can add. And if you want to connect through navigation rules, you can connect. Cancel. Okay. So this is how we create the bounded task flow, but we need components. For example, model layer components for us to create the employee page, all those things. And we need operations. If it goes through create, we need create insert. And in case of update, we need to query the row. So we'll use the set current row with key value. And then we can attach here. For that, we need model layer components. We will pick up the model layer components. So we have this employees, right? In that we have some operations. The operation is create insert, and then we'll be using the create insert and set current row with the key or key value, whichever you want to use. You can use based on whatever the parameters you pass. Based on them, you can decide whether you want to use set current row with key or set current row with key value. The difference is with key value, you have to pass the primary key value, but in case of key, you have to pass the key value, key itself. Key will be alphanumeric, and key value is nothing but a primary key ID. It can be like 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So I'll use the set current row with key value so that it becomes completely reusable for us to call this bounded task flow from anywhere across the application wherever I need this feature. So this bounded task flow takes a parameter. The parameter can be like uh, selected row key, string. If you make this as a common across all your bounded task flows, then you can define this in the um, task flow template itself, so that you don't have to define for each and every task flow you have in the application. It's a required parameter because based on that only we decide the router which way it will go. Also in the behavior part, we'll say always begin new transaction, because when you come to this task flow, should begin a new transaction, and then at the end you will decide whether you want to roll back the transaction or cancel the transaction. The moment I change this begin new transaction, you can see there is a error message coming up. Commit or rollback is required on task flow return activity. Save because the task flow initiates a new transaction. So it's mandatory for me to choose the end transaction, whether it's a commit or a rollback. Now we have all the things required on the creator or edit. Okay, by default, we declare this is a update, so that any confusion, it will try to go in the update mode. We have two outcomes. One is for create, the other one is for the update. We'll use create here. Update. You'll put the expression here. We will check whether the create is equal to single quotes double time, because we will be passing this value, so we exactly know what is the value we are passing. If we pass single quotes double time, then we will consider the outcome as a create option. In case if it is not, if it is anything other than that single quotes double time, we will consider that as a update option. Actually, we don't have to give the space. Then I can simply drag and drop the operation. In case of create, if it decides, one important part is we need to make this as default activity, so that whenever this bounded task flow is called, the first activity which is going to be executed is this create or edit. And we will call create insert in case of create. And then we will call set current row with key value. With whatever the value we pass through the parameter, we will get that and pass it as a row key value here. See, it's totally visual development. It's like a task flow. It's like workflow. In the workflow builder, you can use like this. If the router decides the outcome is create, it will go through this route. If it is deciding update, it will go through this route. So I connected all the dots. If I go full screen, I can make it a little better. Okay, so I think all the things, whatever is required, is already been done in task flow. Now we can go ahead with the creation of the page itself. This is a view activity. This view activity can be connected to a page. If you double click, if it is for the first time, it will show you to create the page, or if it is already there, it will open that page automatically. So it's manage employee.jsf. If you click OK, in that we are going to just have a very simple form with the save and cancel button. Just see if we have the shader panel header. We'll drag and drop this to center. It comes with some toolbar facets for us to put the buttons. For save, the action is available as save, and for cancel, we'll use the cancel option. These steps are there in the document as well, so you can follow it, because a lot of steps, it's very difficult to remember at one shot. As I told you, you have to at least to do this 5 times, again and again and again, and then you will understand most of the parts, and then continuously in your applications, you will be building these kind of pages very frequently. So if I want to test this bounded task flow, I can simply run this bounded task flow, run. It'll ask you for the selected rows key string. Let me give one value which is there in the DB. Say 100. it complains that the URL invoke is not allowed on this. There is a property because I'm directly running that, right? Generally, we should not run, but just for testing purpose, we'll be running it like this. You see, whenever I passed 100, it automatically queries that employee information, and it keeps it ready for me to update this, because on the bounded task flow, it has taken this route, that is update route, and it sets the current row with key value of 100, and then it passes the value. For example, now let me pass another value. I think Nina, will try Nina 101. So it brings up the information 101. But what is the create case? The create case is double quotes, single quotes, double time. I will pass that value, single quotes, double time. Okay, so for some reason it is going into the set current row with key value. Let us check our create edit. It should not have gone there. I think the equal to single quotes, double time. Page flow scope selected key strings. Outcome should have been this. Let's set current row with key value. Why it is going to this all the time? We have to check. Okay, let us call. Let us create a search page also. We'll check it from there whether the parameter passing is the problem. Create one more task flow. Sorry, one more page.
We can debug
Search.
that. No debug statements are
Yeah,
there.
we can. Yeah, we can debug. One second. Search. Because I suspect that could be the testing configuration, which could be the problem. So we'll put an actual page and we'll check that. And if still problem exists, we can use the debug mode to check that. this is going to be a table. If you just need a table, you can have it with the filter, all those things. In case if you don't want, say if you want to have with a search region on the top and bottom, there is all queryable attributes view criteria available. You can reuse that, or you can simply create a new view criteria. For example, if you want to search only by employee number and employee name, you can create a view criteria and then you can drag that view criteria. For now, I will just drag and drop this to the center, and I will say quick query with the table. This gives me an option to search by all the fields which is there in this table. Ideally, you have to use the other approach where you simply call this view criteria, whatever you create based on the parameters you frequently search. Based on that, you create a view criteria, and then you can drag and drop to this page. And let us run this page and see how it looks like. And we need to make small modification to this to call the task flow. Generally, the debug view will be much more slower than the run view. These are all the steps we have done. Step-by-step instructions, so you can follow that during the practice. The only difference which we could see is set current row with key instead of the key value. If you choose like that, then while passing the parameter from the base page, you need to pass the key instead of the key value. The difference is the key will be an alphanumeric representation of the key value. The key value is nothing but the primary key itself, so it's easier. See, this is the condition we have put: the selected row key string equal to single quotes double time, and if it is not, then it will go to the create or update mode based on that definition.
Okay.
So this has step-by-step information, so you can follow blindly and then understand how it works. This is done. So this is a simple search page. If you see, there's a space which is left behind on the start and the end. If you want to make it 0, you can make it 0. So you get more space to work with the search region. If you want to search by employee ID, it comes like this. Or if you want to search by name, it comes here. And also the difference what we are going to do now is when you click on the first name or the employee ID, we should navigate to this employee, or if you put another button called new, when you click new, it should allow you to create a new employee in the DB. This is one search page which we are going to drag this to the unbounded task flow. The unbounded task flow is here. See config.xml. We will drag and drop this search employee PG to this, and then we will use the control flow case. From anywhere you can call the search employee PG, and here you can say search EMP. Okay, and then we will drag and drop the bounded task flow. The bounded task flow is inside the page flows, create employee BTF. So you can call a page, also you can call a bounded task flow. You see the red mark that indicates it is requiring a parameter. Control flow case, I will say this manage employee. Okay. Now inside this page, I can use this manage employee to call the create update employee BTF. Since it is required parameter, I need to pass this value. What I will do is I will take the value from the request scope and then populate the value to the parameter. So it is expecting selected row key string, which is a required parameter. I can give this as request scope. The difference between request scope and the page flow scope is request scope. Say for example, you click a button, a request is generated. Post request is generated, or it can be a get request as well. When you click an action button, it which submits, it is a post action. For that moment, the scope will be existing. Once you navigate there, it automatically loses that. So it clears the value from the scope. So we have to clearly understand what is the different scopes available in ADF and how to use those effectively, so that you don't persist a scope, persist a parameter or variable more than the scope itself. So it will automatically clear the value. Request scope, you are clicking a link or a button, for that moment of time it exists, and that value gets passed to something, and then it disappears. That's what the request scope is about. Page flow scope, till this page task flow is active and it is navigated in between, till that time the value will be there in the page flow scope, which is classic for some cases. For some other cases, it is like persisting a value more than the time it should be. In this case, we are taking some value from the search page, and when you click on a link, it needs to get the employee ID on which I clicked, and then it has to pass that parameter to the another task flow, which takes it in the page flow scope, and then it retains till the page flow is active. And once it is exited, it will automatically come out. In this case, I'll say selected row key string. Now I have to go to this search employee PG. Now the red mark has gone because I passed some parameter. On the employee PG, I have the option of converting the value. Let's use the chance. Okay, I'll keep it in somewhere outside. And on the table, we have this employee ID column.
No, Sudhakar?
Yeah, Tell me.
Yeah, so when you are passing this request scope, right? So in a
Hmm,
layman,
hmm.
I understand that you are getting the request from the previous that search page, right? And it is passing it to the that manage employee page.
Yeah, the request scope is like when I click a link. Let me go to this page. If
Mm-hmm.
assume this is a link,
Yes,
okay? If
correct.
I click
Yes.
that
Okay.
moment of time, the request is generated. Request is generated. On that time, I will capture the employee ID in the scope. Okay, requested request scope dot selected row key string will have a value of 101, and it goes to the page and I cancel and come back. And the next employee ID is nothing but 102. Okay, 102. If I click on that, the previous value whichever I selected, no, it would have already disappeared because it was there in request scope. So the new value 102 will get populated into that. So I don't have to manually go and clear the scope variables or scope parameters. That's the objective of using a request scope. What if you use the page flow scope? Yes, page flow scope also will be there. But what happens is, till I click the next one and it gets populated with 102, unnecessarily the value of 101 is persisted in that parameter or variable, which is not a good practice, because if more and more people use the application concurrently, say 100,000 people use this concurrently, what happens unnecessarily, that variable value is getting populated and it is polluting the scope. So that's why we use the request scope. For that moment of time, whatever the value you want to capture, and you pass it to something else, and that value should disappear. That's the objective of using the request scope. Did it answer your question, or you have something else?
Yes, and how it will know that it will only pick this request or this employee ID only,
Yes, that's
not
what we
the
are
other.
going to connect now, because we defined that variable and we are passing that parameter. So we need to set this value. If you go here, this is the it's not refreshing. Huh? Okay, we need to keep this value because we are going to convert this output text into the link. When we convert it to a link, it will delete the value. So we will put it back. It displays the employee ID. But now the difference is, we need to make sure that we are setting the values. For setting the value, there is a option for doing that as well. 1 second. If I can grab the set action listener. The set action listener, when this link is clicked and whenever there is an action has been generated, we need to populate this value with the parameter which we have, that is request scope dot selected row key string. Okay, now to pass the value, we need to pass it from the row dot employee ID. We need to pass the value row dot employee ID. So what we are saying here is, take the value from row dot employee ID and set the value to the request scope variable, and then this variable is being sent as a parameter to the bounded task flow. And I click on OK, it adds the set action listener. But there is one more thing which we have to do. That is, people always forget, they set the set action listener properly, but they don't link this action properly. Here the action is manage employee. For that action, you set this action listener. Whenever this action is generated, the from and to value, from the from value, it will populate the to value. So that means the request scope is getting populated to the this parameter selected row key string. It will have the employee ID. So that's how we link the task flow. When you go to search employee page, and you click on this any of the employee ID button, and it takes you to the create update employee BTF. And while taking it there, it takes the value from the row.employee ID and populates the request scope dot selected row key string. That request scope dot selected row key string is passed to the employee task flow. And inside the employee task flow, what will happen? Whatever the parameter you pass, it goes into the page flow scope, and throughout this call, the page flow scope will be having a value persisted. It's not like request scope; it goes away immediately. But in case of page flow scope, till this task flow is active, it will have the page flow scope variable. That's why we don't pass for each and every attribute. Instead, you use the page flow scope to variable to get that information throughout the page flow scope. The task flow. Whenever the task flow is active, you can get the page flow scope variable. But the request scope, once it is being clicked, and it would have automatically disappeared. Now let us refresh this page. You see now the employee ID is nothing but a link, but here it will not work properly. So you have to run the unbounded task flow, and the default view activity, let me do it as search employee PG. That comes, let us click Nina. It comes as Nina, then you cancel, you click Alexander, it comes as an Alexander. And if I update and then save, see, immediately the change has been reflected. It is Alexander update. If I want to change it back, now this update case was working. The issue which we had is with the new. So we will see how to add a new button as well. If you see, we ran the unbounded task flow. This is a unbounded task flow, and from there we clicked and went into the bounded task flow, and then we exited the bounded task flow. It came to the unbounded task flow. That navigation is available here. We went to search employee PG, and we clicked on the link, and it called a bounded task flow. It passed the parameter, and based on the parameter, it queried the row for us, and it kept it ready for the update mode. The important part right now is to use the search employee PG and add one more section, most probably on the panel header itself. Let us see if there is a facet available here for the toolbar. Yeah, toolbar is there. We'll add one more button to this. Oh, it's not good. On the toolbar, we'll add one more button. This button is going to be called as new employee. This one, we need to call the same action, the manage employee only, but what value we pass to the request scope matters. Set action listener, drag and drop to this button. Here I'll be passing the single quotes double time to the request scope. It's the same thing as update, but here I'm sending a hard-coded value, because when I check this hard-coded value in the router, I know exactly this is new because I am deciding what to pass. But the other values are based on dynamic IDs. That is the primary key values which we are passing. In this case, it's much straightforward, because I am passing some value which I am comparing and saying that if I pass this value, that's create. If that is anything else, we will go to the update. That's what we have configured in this router. If you see the router conditions, if it is single quotes double time, go to create or you go to update. That's what we are saying here. Let us rerun the ADFC config.xml. Let's query this value. 101 is working correct. 105 is working correct. Now you see there is a new employee. It is also working correctly now. It has it will allow us to create a new employee. Okay, for all these things, I'm manually populating. Slowly, what we will do is we will add a list of values and conditions like higher confirmation date cannot be before the higher date. All those validations we will do one by one. Okay, just created this
Values
record.
can be generated from the sequence also. IDs.
Yes,
Employer.
yes, all those things we will do it one by one. That's why we create the template part in the beginning, and slowly we will add these features. So, do you have any questions till this point? Like, what is the how we have done this? Because I'm sure a lot of questions will come, and also during after this class, you have to do this by yourself many times. Then, because right till now we haven't written any Java code for this exercise. The complete feature was available to us just by doing things declaratively. That was the biggest advantage we could see, which is a big difference between the other frameworks like OA framework, all those things. The same feature you must have written a lot of Java code for just for navigation purpose, passing parameters, all those things. But in ADF, it is much more simpler and it is a straightforward approach. Yeah, any questions?
Uh, so whenever you want to perform any action on any button, so you are using action listener every time, right? Like same as set forward URL in case of OF.
Yes, yes. But here everything is program, it is declarative in nature,
Yeah,
set
yeah, right.
action listener. Okay. So if you are comfortable with this exercise and if you can do it by yourself, uh, you can do that. Let me walk you through the steps one more time so that you understand what we have done till now. Okay. So our final objective
Yes.
was to have a search page. On the search page, if you click on any employee, it should bring the employee for update. And then if you want to update, you can update. If you click a new employee, it should bring an empty record for us to update the information. Of course, this will do all kinds of validation. If you don't want the validation to fire, you can set the reset action listener on that cancel, so that it allows you to navigate back to the screen. And the steps are like we have two task flows. One is unbounded task flow, the other one is bounded task flow. This is a bounded task flow which takes an input parameter, selected OK string, that's a required value. The behavior is always it enables a new transaction. That means once you enter, the only proper way to exit is to either commit or roll back the transaction. And on the router, whatever the parameter we pass, we are deciding whether it is a create or update based on some predefined value. The predefined value which we pass is single quotes double time. If we get that information and it equals to this condition, then we are saying create. For all the other cases, you go to update, because all the other cases, like, you don't know what value will come. It is based on the data value which is available within the DB for the employee ID column. So we cannot really compare that value. So we are taking anything other than single quotes double time, you take it as a update. If it the router's outcome is create, then you call create insert. This is also dragged and dropped from the data control, and then it goes to the employee page. And on the other case, you go to the update in the set current row with key value. Whatever the value is being passed, you can simply refer that value and pass it to the set current row with key value. What it does, it queries the information and it keeps it ready for update. It's the same page, manage employees, for both the cases, create and update. And when you press save on the manage employee page, it will call this task flow return save. But this task flow return save is connected to commit. It not only returns, it just commits and return. In the same way, when you press cancel, it will roll back the transaction and then return. This is a complete packaged unit which you can call from anywhere inside the application. Can be this bounded task flow can be called from another bounded task flow, or it can be called from another unbounded task flow. By default, every application you create comes with this ADFC config.xml, which is nothing but the default unbounded task flow. Here we have some default navigations like home page, all those things, references as a wildcard entry. Same way, we have the wildcard entry for the search employee as well. So you can go to search employee page from any page in the application. And from search employee page, we are calling the bounded task flow, which is create update employee BTF. And this create update employee BTF as a mandatory parameter selected row key string. This value we are getting from the request scope. So the request scope value is being passed from the search page. On the search page, we have a new employee which calls a button which calls the manage employee action. Using the set action listener, we are calling the we are actually populating the value of selected row key string in request scope with a predefined value, that is single quotes double time, because this is a value which we are expecting in the router. If it comes, then we are treating it as new. For all the other cases, we are treating it as a update. We have to convert the output text in the table to a link. On that link, the same way, we call the manage employees. We generate action called manage employee, which navigates. But while navigating, we need to set some parameter as well. We'll get the current row's employee ID and then set it to the selected row key string. From the request scope, whenever something is clicked, it will immediately disappear after passing the parameter. So we don't have to clear those variables for every time. It will be automatically done because you set it at the request scope level. And once the value is passed to the page flow scope, till the task flow is active, that page flow scope parameter will be available in the scope to reference inside the page or different actions, all those things, it will be available. But in case of passing the parameter, it just for that moment of when the request is generated, when you click on something, only till that moment this request scope will be active. There are various other scopes like application scope, session scope, all those things are a view scope. All those things are like higher time frame. For example, when you log into a application, it you can put some values in the session scope that will be active till you log out. So the time frame these objects are persisted in the memory is being a long time. After that, if you have application scope, it will be applicable for all the sessions, that is user sessions. That is a larger time frame. And view scope, whenever your view is page is active, when you are on that page, if you're not navigating to the another page, till that moment the scope whatever the value you put on that scope will be active. Likewise, to understand effective usage of these variables and scopes, You need to understand what are the scopes first available and how long the value set on that scopes will be active. Based on that, you can make a better decision of putting your variables, populating it, and how to use that. Okay, now we have seen how to create this unbounded task flow and bounded task flow, and we ran the unbounded task flow, which has a default activity of the search employee PG, and then from there we navigated to the create employee BDF. The another way which you can try is you can create another another bounded task flow and drag and drop this search employee PG to that. From there you can call this bounded task flow. So that means you can call an bounded task flow from an unbounded task flow. Also you can call this bounded task flow from another bounded task flow. By this way, this bounded task flow is completely reusable, and you can call this bounded task flow from any page in your application through a unbounded task flow, or you can call this bounded task flow from another bounded task flow. So that's completely a flexible unit. So your application in future, whenever you develop, everything should be packaged inside the bounded task flows. Either it's a page fragment or it can be a page itself, so that it promotes high levels of reusability not only in this application. You can call this bounded task flow in another application you develop as well. You can simply deploy this application as a jar file, and then you can consume that jar file in another application. This is a very classic case of using ADF application. You can build a modular ADF application through this concept, and it's also very scalable in nature, and it's easy to maintain this kind of application in future rather than having one single large application. Any questions?
Okay, so it is all actually, yeah, we will try to do that and understand the
Yes,
steps going
yes,
forward
very
in that.
important to do this again and again. My estimate is based on the previous experience of conducting this for 10 years now. You have to do it by yourself many times, like 5 times at least. Only then you will understand and remember these steps. Once you remember the steps, then it is easier for you to work on any ADF application in future, because this is the classic page you will be developing across various applications. Once you're comfortable with these steps, you can build a lot of applications using this concept. In the next
Yes,
session, I'll walk you through this how to generate the sequence and the populate, and also we will do some validations using the list of value, and also we will do something like a validation of dates, like the start date cannot be greater than end date, all those things, and we will do that. So Inder will
Okay,
be joining tomorrow, or he
we will be joining. Today only
okay, okay,
actually stuck in
uh,
some issues in office.
okay, all right. So we'll catch up in the tomorrow session. I will send across this task flow document as well as a video by evening. Task
Sure.
flow document I can send it right now itself. The video I think it will convert and it will be ready by evening only, and then I'll send across that.
okay, Sudhakar.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
1 minute, Sudhakar.
Sure.
So, in my case, can I put any password for WebLogic, right?